Just because
Where would they even be?
Brooklyn set them on the middle of the table, so they're just middle
Oh, yeah. Okay, you can make a loop right now?
Yeah, if you can,
Yeah.
then I can. I think Grant's introducing you. I'll flip the screenshot. Just since we're recording, I'll just flip the screenshot, switch the slides, and reshare.
But maybe like 2 or 3 out there.
Okay, good.
But maybe when people actually get up from those tables, they'll take them with them.
Man, like, I would go ahead. I would get started. I think we're, yeah. We're past. Yeah.
Floating controls. Yeah, I always just drag when I was with the couple. I just drag it to the box. I don't know what else you're supposed to do with it. He's bed today, right? Nap time.
Go ahead. You got it? All right, introduce Ryan, we'll rock and roll. All right.
Everybody, I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Ryan Haden. He is an associate professor of soil fertility and sustainable agriculture at OSU's Booster campus. Ryan has spent a considerable amount of time researching organic oats, interseeding cover crops, nutrient cycling, and climate smart agricultural practices. He teaches an undergraduate class on sustainable agriculture. Today, he is going to finish his breakout reading with a discussion on organic oats for grain and forage, and possibly sprinkle in interseeded cover crop research. Ryan Haden.
All right, thank you very much, Grant. And just to introduce myself. I do see some familiar faces out there, which is great, but this is my first time at this particular meeting. And so for those that don't know me, my role at Ohio State ATI is primarily to lead the agronomy and sustainable ag programs for our 2-year undergraduate students. So about 75% of my job is teaching. So I teach a wide range of courses in soil fertility, intro to agronomy, forage crops, and introduction to sustainable agriculture, as well as some international experiences for students as well. But I also have a 25% research appointment as well. And so most of my work has primarily focused on the soil fertility. I'm a soil scientist by training. I've done some work with precision fertilizer placement technologies, as well as cover crops, and our topic for today, which will start with the organic oat variety trials. And so just to provide a little bit of background, so I've been at Ohio State now for 10 years. So when I first arrived, our farm manager at the Worcester campus approached me and said, hey, I've got an idea to set up a long-term organic oat variety trial that I think would be of interest to you. So I took a look at it, and Carol made a compelling case, and so I decided to kind of come alongside him and start to help him out on this project. It has evolved into a pretty interesting project from my perspective, and it was the first organic variety trial that Ohio State initiated, and flowing out of that has been the larger, organic corn performance trials that Osler has been involved in. So that's exciting to see that growth, and I want to share some of the results of this project. So just a little bit of background. When you look out at the market, we're seeing a lot of different possible opportunities for marketing organic oats. Certainly, there's a market for food grade oats. We're seeing opportunities for growing oats as a component of horse and beef cattle feed operations. There's marketing opportunities to integrate organic oats into cover crop mixtures and soil oat cover crop plantings. And I'm also seeing opportunities, maybe not so much in Ohio, but outside of Ohio, and have seen some potential in Ohio for integrating oat and small grain forages into beef and dairy rations. So I'll talk a little bit about that towards the tail end of this first component of my talk. So throughout this last couple of days, we've heard a lot of discussions about diversifying rotations and how you go about doing it. And there's a lot of folks here that have tried a lot more complex rotations than I have. But in our work at Ohio State, in terms of our organic oat variety trials, we primarily focused on 2 organic rotations, primarily corn, soybeans, followed by oats, underseeded with a red clover cover crop that we then, repeat that rotation. And then we've also done these trials, corn, soybeans, oats with underseeding of alfalfa for a couple of years. So those rotations have worked pretty well for us. And when you're doing a variety trial, you want to try to keep it as somewhat as simple as possible, so that you're not bringing in a lot of factors that can complicate the story. I see a lot of other advantages to including oats in rotations. oats, as well as other small grains. If we can, continue to integrate those into our rotations, to diversify rotations, we tend to see knock-on benefits across a wide range of the cash grains that are harvested. So in terms of yield, we also see oats competing well with our annual wheats, and I also really like oats in a rotation, particularly even in a conventional setting. Having a small grain that you take off in the summer, then gives you a nice window of opportunity to do all sorts of operations to improve your ground. So whether that's applying manure, lime, seeding, more diverse cover crop mixtures, and oats can provide that window of opportunity. And as we mentioned before with the rotations that we use, underseeding with various clovers is a possibility, as well as using it as a nurse crop for alfalfa. So in the organic oat variety trials that we've done, they basically started back in 2015, and we continued them through 2020 with one missed year due to poor weather conditions in 2019. And we conduct these trials on our certified ground, and we do this in a randomized complete block design with 4 replicates. Typically our plots are 40-foot long, and depending on the year, we've had either 5-foot wide plots or 10-foot wide plots. The lion's share of our fertility comes from the composted dairy manure that Matt Kleinhans mentioned. However, we do top dress with a small amount of Chilean nitrate, which we found to be beneficial. We seed at roughly 100 pounds per acre, and typically seed in a conventional 7.5-inch row spacing in mid-to-late April, with harvest in late July, early August for grain. And in this study, we primarily looked at heading date, logging percentage, plant height, obviously grain yield, and those are going to be the main components we take a look at. I'm not a plant breeder. I'm primarily a soil scientist and agronomist, so there's obviously a lot more data that can be taken into breeding, improved varieties, but that's really not what we're trying to achieve here. We're trying to essentially get information to you guys about what are the favorable varieties that you may want to consider here in the pines. And one thing that I have learned through this project is there's not a whole lot of suppliers of organic oat seed. There's only a handful in the Midwest. And the two that I've found to be most useful in my work is Albert Lee Seeds and Welker Seed and Honeycutt Company. And I provided links to their websites. They offer a fairly wide range of certified organic oat seed that I've utilized, and they've been kind enough to donate most of the seeds that we've used in our study. I should also note that we've got archived results of this study that we've been posting over the years on the Ohio Crop Performance Trials. And so for many of the organic groups, you may or may not be aware of those crop performance trials because until recently, it hasn't really done a very good job of representing organic crops. And we're trying to change that. And so starting in 2015, I've started to post some of my results. And then starting in 2019, our organic corn performance trials. So I would encourage you guys to check out this archive and have a look and see what what's of interest to you. In the future, yeah, I anticipate, seeing a organic food meat, added to this list going forward. So, we're getting there, with, hopefully with some of your guys' help, we can, begin to, get this information out. So what do these, archived, oat performance trials, tend to look like? I try to keep them simple, for you guys. We, each year, the range of varieties that we're able to find in the market, we obtain those varieties and we include them in the trial. So in this particular year, we have probably 10 or 12 different varieties. One thing that I have found to be a challenge is not every year are all of the organic varieties available on the market. And so that has caused some discontinuity in the results, as you'll see, and I'll try to help you interpret those results to the best key bits of information that you can find. You can download these data sheets online. Our heading date, which can help you with anticipating the your harvest day as well as maturity. Lodging percentage, we always track that before we harvest and estimate that usually using a visual assessment. Plant height, mean yields, and so forth. And for the yield data, we always provide information so that you can see what the statistical difference is. So what I'd like to kind of focus on today is how to draw some conclusions from the 5 years of work. And you'll notice here, we've covered about 24 different varieties over the course of this 5-year study. And not every variety is represented in every year clearly. And that's largely due to the availability of seeds within the market. And so because those seeds become available, sometimes are not in supply, sometimes you're going to have to be able to choose from a menu of possible options. And the way that we've structured this is I tend to like to use this type of data in a way of helping folks first understand, are you getting the most out of your oat growth? And what are some of the things that you can do to improve your performance? So is your seeding date where it needs to be? Is your soil fertility where it needs to be? And are you using a variety that is going to give you the best chance of getting a decent yield? And so in our study, we published a study average over 5 years. We averaged around 75.5 bushels per acre over that 5-year period across all varieties. And then if you look at the individual averages for the different varieties, and I have highlighted the varieties where it was only a single year, so those ones with that asterisks next to them, take those with a grain of salt. That may be just a one-off. But for those that have more than one, I've presented the multi-year averages. And in an effort to try and make this as simple as possible, the way I would take this information is of this list of 24, keep your eyes open for varieties that are in the top half of this list. That basically indicates varieties that consistently perform above the study average. And so varieties like Morton, which has several years of pretty good yields, as well as the varieties where we have you know, 4, maybe 5 years of data. I think, you know, varieties like Horsepower, Dion, Goliath, Grains, those are some of the varieties that I would really focus on because we've got a robust data set and those varieties consistently perform above the study average. So, just, you know, a bit of guidance in terms of how to interpret and use this information. The next step is if your performance of your oats are, you know, not, you know, meaning kind of what our study average is, ask yourself the question, what can I be doing to make improvements? Can I select a better, more promising variety? Do I need to do more work to enhance fertility and so forth? So we conducted that study over 5 years, and to be completely honest, there's not a whole lot of plant breeding work being done on oats in this day and age, countrywide. We need to see more, in my view. So we wanted to switch things up a little bit and ask the question, what of these oat varieties, and then expanding it out to spring planted small grains, have potential you know, from a forage perspective. And so starting this year, we essentially, you know, conducted a very similar design trial, but with the goal of harvesting the oats as a forage at root stage and at milk stage to compare yield and quality metrics. And this also was driven largely by the fact that we got a new piece of equipment that has facilitated that for us. So we got a new forage harvester. It's a little guy, and we can go out there and measure, you know, grass forages and alfalfa forages a lot better than we used to at the Worcester site. You know, yeah, it's a little bit embarrassing, but the previous generation of forage harvester was a bit of a Frankenmobile, built from a sickle bar attached to a 1950s era Willys Jeep. So I think we've made a little bit of a step up, and so we're going to try to utilize that in this game. So you know, what are we trying to achieve? So we're wanting to look at forage yield in terms of dry matter at food and milk stage, and also look at how that impacts our forage quality. And food year was in the Worcester area during prime oat, you know, growing season. How much rain did we get in you know, after oat seeding?
Oh, that would be 0.
Yeah, pretty close to 0. Yeah, so here's the cumulative precipitation. We got a little bit of rain right after seeding to get it out of the ground, and then we had a good that area on the bottom part of the graph where it's really flat. That's really when our oats should have been tillering and in their, you know, vegetative phase. We didn't get the type of rainfall that we typically get during that period. So if you look here, I decided in this first year, a boot stage harvest of dry matter was just not enough. There wasn't enough material there. In the future, I'd like to continue to include that, but we got some, you know, rescue rainfall, you know, right about boot stage, and that you know, triggered a lot of growth, and that we harvested at milk stage. And a couple of things to note. So our South Dakota buffalo oats and our Minnesota pearl oats were some of our top performers. And then we also included in this year, some other, small grain forage crops, gunner, triticale, or triticale, and, Hayes, barley, and royal, barley, all, certified organic. And our gunner, triticale, performed very similarly to some of our better performing, oat varieties with, better, crude protein and better, relative, feed quality. So, some of those things are interesting to note. Couple of other things, happened this year, which I thought were quite interesting as a researcher. If I were a farmer, I would be less interested in them. But we had a massive outbreak of cereal leaf beetle larvae this year. And so our small grain forage variety trial, actually was pretty well suited to detecting what varieties or species might be more tolerant to cereal leaf beetle larva damage. And I think this was also exacerbated by the fact that plants were stunted. When plants are growing readily, they can often outgrow the damage. But in a year where for more than 3 weeks we didn't get a drop of rain, it became really visible and apparent. And so when we started to see this happen, I called up Kelly Tillman and Amy Raudenbush, who are our entomologists on campus, and had their students come out and survey some of the damage and see if they could detect any differences among our oat varieties, barley varieties, and triticale varieties. And what was really interesting to me is, pretty much across the board, the oats were all pretty negatively affected in terms of the number of cereal leaf beetle larvae per stem, and the visual assessment of a damage rating on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being high levels of damage greater than 75%. And our triticale, basically, subject to the same pressure, grew largely unscathed. And I thought that was, it was very visually apparent when you were out in the field. The number of cereal leaf beetle larvae on the stems was much reduced, even though 5 feet away, you could see the damage on the oats. And just a little, entomology question for you guys. Who here has ever seen a cereal leaf beetle larva? Yeah. Who has ever walked through a field of cereal leaf beetle larva? What happens? You get wet, you get covered in all this goo. And the question is, what is that goo? It's actually their frass, meaning it's their excrement. Apparently, these guys have figured out that if they smear their excrement all over themselves, it protects them from other, predators and so forth. So, that's interesting. Yeah.
Did you attempt any treatment?
We did not. We just were observing in this case.
Neem oil or neem blend is an effective treatment. You can treat it also.
Yes. So, what we're hearing here is possibility of using neem as an effective treatment. In this case, it was already, a massive outbreak. We caught it too late. And from my perspective, it was interesting to just kind of follow it through and ask the question, since our study design was set up to look at those differences in varieties. So one response is, what is something that a grower can do to prevent potential damage from this particular pest if it's, common in your area? Opt for triticale over oats. It's taking a message. So just a to zoom in a little bit, if you looked at our work notes, which had among the highest damage, we collected a bunch of stems, put those on white paper, photographed them, and then had students visually assess them. And essentially, between 50 and 75% of those stems had severe damage. And so probably wouldn't have seen such severe damage had growth been better, but it was just very apparent. Compare that to the kind of triticale, and there was some damage, but clearly not as substantial. So a couple of take-home messages to consider. For oat grain, consider the following varieties: Haden, Morton, Jim, Saddle, Warrior, Goliath, Plains, and Dion. All of these varieties yielded at or above the study average pretty consistently. For spring small grain forages, you may want to consider under triticale, good yield and good quality, and the added bonus of resistance to cereal leaf beetle larvae. Your Hayes forage barley, good quality but lower yield. And then George forage oats, better quality than the other oat varieties with pretty above average yields as another option. So those are some of the work we've done on the topic. There's lots of other questions that we could potentially pursue. Also want to give you guys an opportunity to share some ideas or thoughts on how we can expand this. Some conversations I've had just this week, potentially evaluate native varieties, and evaluate winter black oats as a potential option. We could probably have to expand, maybe do another trial looking at fall seeded small grains. But those are some potential future directions we're looking at. But I want to take a little bit of time here. How much time do we have? What time is it right now? What's that? Three. We still got a little bit of time. So let's spend about 5 minutes. And if you guys have any ideas, I'd like to harvest some of those ideas from you guys. Go ahead.
I'm just curious. OERDC's been doing a lot of research for 30 years ago, 35 years ago, when we had public seeds, the old Clinton notes and all those old native oats. I would bet you anything that the yields were higher back then at those 12 weeks. Now on all these trademark foods. What happens? Is global warming in winter in this area, or as the handouts are just cheaper those down where you got to plant 3 bushel an acre for you? So,
I guess my question for you is, what type of yield levels were you typically seeing?
Back the old Clinton notes, it would adjust for population and have a big mare's tail and get real bushy, and it would compensate for a lot of different problems. And so you could grow 100 bushel oats without even trying. That was me getting farmer. Remember that we grew a lot of oats on here.
Right.
It seemed like we can't do that. It just seems like these oats varieties, unless it's a totally different kind of new management to grow oats than what I was taught. They just don't amount to much, and of course, the public oats pools more.
Yeah.
And so we're stuck with what the instructors given us. Right, they've jumped. I mean, I just can't find anything. And they've taken that characteristics of those really good oats that grew in our area. We're growing, we're in that the growing zone in our area. I can't have anybody explain to me what happens to oat yields in our area.
I think it's a great question. We've had some years where we've had numerous varieties perform above 100 bushels an acre, but from what I've seen, 75, even compared to a lot of the sites in Iowa and South Dakota, we're not seeing So I think you're right. I think it has to do, maybe with some of the materials, it's lagging.
Well, we see, every crop, we've shown tremendous improvement in yield, except for oats.
Yeah.
Oats is like the bastard child of grain.
Yeah.
No one.
I would agree with that.
One question I would have is how much has our mutations in our soil quality declined during this period? Maybe related to that somewhat.
Over that 30-year period.
Yes.
That's a great question. I don't have the answer to that, but I
want to pose the question.
yeah. I think you're, that's a fair point.
We have a lot of experience with oats right near Worcester, and we raise 300 acres of oats almost yearly. And I don't know the exact figures, the fellow that usually does it, Scott, he's not here right now. But we can consistently raise over 100 bushel oats. Yeah. The number one thing you need to look at is how many seeds are you planting per square foot? And an old farmer was my neighbor for years, farmed horses. He would always raise really good oats, and my dad and I, we planted 2.5 bushels per acre, and we'd get 50, 60 bushel oats. And his oats was tremendous compared to ours, just by looking at it. And I finally asked him one day, I said, well, what are you doing different? And he says, well, first of all, I'm not driving a tractor all over the field because he was farming with horses. But he said the main thing was that the new varieties of oats, the seeds are a lot bigger. And he said, the old days, 2.5 bushels was a lot of seeds out there, but now 2.5 bushels is much fewer seeds per pound, and so you're not planting big enough. So our goal from then on was to plant 4 bushels, and that's Scott and our goal. We have a John Deere air drill, and we open it all the way up, but you can't plant it any faster. And we planted, and we can't quite get 4 bushels, but there's a lot of fields. Well, the other thing I'll say is, in your plots, the small plot, I can't see how that could be a very good representative, because in our big field, 50-acre field of oats, around the edges, it's never as good. When you get out in the middle, we'll a lot of times have oats making 150, 160 bushels per acre, but the edges are never as good. And in your small plots, all you have is edges. And so, it works a lot by the competition too, that makes it stronger. So that's my observation.
Yeah, fair point.
When you plant one most of the next row, are you interseeding alfalfa?
No, not when we're doing that.
So you.
If you were gonna plant alfalfa, we planted, we probably tear up the straw afterwards and plant summer seed. Only time we would do alfalfa is when we planted 2.5 bushels of oats.
I have another comment about oats. This is something I absorbed over the years and talked about many years. It's a little trouble to say. March oats, heavy oats. April oats, good oats. May oats, light oats. June oats, no oats.
Yeah. Absolutely. I have been trying to push my seeding dates earlier and earlier, but the earliest I've ever got is the 5th of April, and that was a one-off. Our conditions hadn't been quite, right for that over this period.
What was your yield, or what was your planting date on 2017? That was your highest yield average if you go back to your charts.
Right.
2017 was like 95 bushels to the acre, I think. And you can probably look maybe
Yeah, I do have that
right there.
right there.
Looks like it.
It was the 24th
24th of April.
of April. It was later
I would say that.
than ideal.
Because a lot of times we plant oats in March.
Yeah.
And that's the way you gotta do it. In Canada, a lot of times they'll plant oats with a no-till drill on frozen ground. And that's how they do it. maybe even plant it in the fall on frozen ground and hope that it doesn't come up till spring.
Right. All right, fantastic conversation. I've learned a lot. I always do. And I appreciate your guys' input and feedback, and we'll take that all on board. How much time do we got? 20 minutes?
Last one.
All right, so
Still three
I was asked also to put in a little bit on interseeded cover crop, which is another topic that I've had a lot of fun exploring over the last several years. And so can you switch that up to the next presentation?
While Sarah's switching that, just a quick note, there is a CCA sign-in sheet for this, topic. It's up here on the clipboard. If you need it, just come get it, once we wrap up. Such a small group, I didn't want to pass it around. So.
All right, so a little bit of a disclaimer on this particular topic. I'm going to share a little bit of my experience of working with interseeded cover crops in corn. And the vast majority of my work has been, in a conventional setting. So I'm going to share some of that information. But then, at the end of this that presentation, share a few thoughts on how this might be applicable in an organic setting. And so I also just want to note Osler and our graduate student, Jonah Van Roekel, is they've been, on board with some of our more recent work, and Osler leading some zone work on interseeded cover cropping. And so that's exciting for me to see these guys get involved and contribute. So I'm a big fan of cover crops. I think there's a lot of different ways that you can integrate them into your rotations and different ways of seeding them and planting them. Regardless of how you get them out there, they offer a lot of benefits in terms of obviously soil erosion as kind of their first primary job, but also enhancing soil health, scavenging leftover nitrogen and providing nitrogen if you've incorporated legumes. But one of the biggest challenges, if you talk to growers in terms of being able to integrate cover crops more effectively into your rotations, and there may be some just overall hesitancy to use cover crops that factors in. This might be an excuse, but I think to a certain extent, there's a lot of truth to it, is that there's not enough time to get a wide variety of cover crops established after harvesting corn or beans. And you just got that narrow window. And if you plan to establish cover crops after grain harvest, you're limited to very few options: cereal, rye, maybe wheat, but you're limited. And so there's been a lot of interest in novel methods for getting seed out into a standing crop. There's been efforts at aerial seeding. I like aerial seeding. It can cover a lot of acres very quickly. It can be cost effective if you work with your neighbors or community. And it can be good for later seeding, at dry down. Downside is seed's not in contact with the soil, and higher seeding rates are often required, and you're a prisoner to the weather in terms of timely rainfall. Similarly, we have similar limitations with high void interseeding. You can cover some good acres, but again, you're putting that seed on top of the soil as opposed to in contact with the soil. So again, you're a victim of the weather. So one of the things that we've looked at is using high clearance drills to get our cover crops out there, to take advantage of that better seed soil contact, and to a certain extent become less dependent on that timely rain, results in more consistent establishment. And we've been successful in interseeding between V3 and V6 stage. And since it's so early in the growing season, you can integrate a potentially very large menu of different cover crop species into your operations. You can grow a single species, or you can grow multi-species mixtures. Downside is, depending on the size of your drill, it can take a while to cover ground, and it's at a time when you're busy. You're trying to, if you're a conventional grower, put down side dress nitrogen or spray herbicides. And you still are weather dependent. You still need that timely rainfall to be successful. So just a couple of other examples here. Yeah, I've seen plenty of instances if you're aerial seeding of your cover crop seeds germinating in the whirl. That's kind of what we're looking at here. And again, just surface application of seed is not the best situation as compared to drilling in nice rows.
Do you have any problems that like interseeding is a national problem for you? Not all of it, not loosening up the where it started with getting ground loose with comparison, has more chance of the rainfall to start.
Absolutely, I think that's a great point, and it's actually coming. I'm going to try to just move through here because I know we're almost out of time. So a couple of just observations. Where would this fit into cropping systems? So typically the interseeding at V4 to V6 stage, a lot of the early work on this was done in silage systems. And the advantage there is you're taking your corn off early, opening up that canopy, and the cover crop already being established, has a chance to grow pretty much unchecked, starting in September. And that's working pretty well in dairy cropping systems. It's a little bit more challenging when you're working in a grain production system. And so that's one of the things that we wanted to explore. I also really like interseeded cover crops in the context of beef cattle production. We've got a lot of beef cattle producers that like to graze corn stalks, and wouldn't it be great to graze something green in between? And so that's where I see most of the interest in this type of production system coming. So, what were some of our overall findings? We did some work in 2015 and 2016, where we evaluated interseeded cover crops, interseeded at V4, V5 stage, comparing it to a no cover crop control. We tested various single species cover crop treatments, so annual ryegrass, red clover, Melansa clover, and tillage radish. And first question I always ask when we're doing this type of research is, do no harm. The whole old Hippocratic oath. You don't want, what you're trying to do to adversely impact the yield of your crop. And so we were attentive to that. So in 2015 and 2016, in none of the treatments did we see any evidence that the cover crop resulted in a yield penalty compared with a no cover crop control. And we did that 2 years back to back, continuous corn. And although the the differences weren't significant, one of the things that you'll notice is that particularly in 2016, so the second year, so we're planting, interseeded cover crops again back into that same treatment, but the previous year, we worked in those cover crops into the ground before we planted the corn again. I don't necessarily want to recommend corn on corn, but it was an opportunity to see if interseeded cover crops and a corn on corn system could perform similarly to having a legume in the rotation. And we saw some promising results. In most cases, particularly with the legume cover crops, our yields were notably higher in the red clover relative to the corn no cover crop control, and the balanza clover relative to the cover crop control. Those differences were not significant because there was a lot of variability, but still, it's pointing in the right direction. A couple of other things to note. I don't necessarily think that interseeding is right in all circumstances. And in particular, I've had some failures when it comes to interseeding in Western. In 2016, we established a couple trials in South Charleston, and we got very little establishment of the cover crop that we interseeded. It was a dry year, so that certainly contributed some. But in general, what I've seen is in your higher yielding environments, the canopy closes so quickly that the cover crop can't compete effectively. And so there's, I think, some challenges there. You can orient your rows to capture the sun better. You can use cover crops that are more shade tolerant, but areas that I think are particularly promising for work, and something that Osler and I would like to do coming up, is evaluate potential for short statured hybrids to allow better light penetration, and maybe widen the window for that cover crop to be established, as well as 60-inch corn. And we've tried it at least initially in 60-inch corn with a twin row setup. And I think there's possibilities there, but we're not quite ready to share that information with everybody yet. So our hypotheses there are that the shorter statured corn will provide a better opportunity for the cover crops to establish, and better biomass production for the canopy closes. Same idea with the wider spacing. And so our hope there is that the similar minimal to non-significant impacts on yield will maintain in that wider spacing. And we haven't established that yet, as I mentioned. So hopefully we can get some funding together to explore that going forward. So to bring this back to an organic context, one of the big questions that I always get when I'm talking about interseeded cover crops is, what is your herbicide program? And typically in a conventional setting, one thing that I've found that works as a burn down is a combination of glyphosate, 2,4-D, and either sharpen or outlook to provide some short-term residual weed control. And then we follow that up with glyphosate at interseeding, because we're using Roundup Ready varieties typically. Now, in an organic setting, those tools obviously are, not part of your toolbox. So I have worked with local organic producer to test out some of the, these ideas for interseeding. And one of the things that, immediately became apparent is these deep furrows that are, caused, from uh, your cultivation passes aren't really very compatible with our high clearance drill. We can basically line up the outer 3 rows, row 1 and row 2 of our interseeding rows at the proper depth, but then the center basically just gets sprinkled on the surface, and we take advantage of the rough soil surface for that germination. And ultimately that worked out pretty well. We had pretty good establishment right in that center area, just from simply sprinkling it on the surface of a fairly well cultivated furrow. So for the producer that I was working with, that was just fine for him, because it meant he didn't have to worry about a high clearance drill, and he could just broadcast in his setting. So I think that the question that was asked earlier, really is a relevant one. So I also do think that in an organic setting, looking for opportunities for wider row spacing, potentially short statured corn varieties could also be potentially beneficial, but we also need to be cognizant of the potential weed pressure that can come from that wider window of an open canopy. So lots of questions for adapting this system to an organic setting. Again, I want to put the questions back to you. Have you guys, any of you guys tried interseeding into standing corn in an organic setting? What have been some of your observations? What have been some of the thoughts or solutions that you may have considered?
We've been looking for a cover crop that doesn't get away from us like rye does, be it in an organic situation. We've been experimenting with the winter camelina. You ever heard of that? And we can plant it really late, as late as November 15th, and still get a cover. It doesn't grow with nearly as well in the fall as we would hope. It really takes off in the spring. First 2 years we drilled it, and this last year we flew it on, and hoping to get it in earlier and get more growth. Don't get any more growth in the fall, but we did get it established.
And is your goal for it primarily to just serve as a cover crop and
Yeah,
not
just cover crop.
oilseed crop? Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, my question on the 60-inch rows, why the twin rows? What's the advantage of twin rows at 60?
Well, so one of the things that that I wanted to try and maintain was a population, and by tricking our planter into planting twin rows, because we don't have a twin row planter to facilitate this. So we basically set up our planter, nudged it 8 inches to the side, and did another pass. But at a reduced seeding rate. And so the idea there is to provide a little bit more space for those rows those corn plants to mature.
We did 60-inch rows and we just doubled the population in the row and no problem with spacing in the row. And we were at 60 in the row. I think, we tried again, we're gonna go much higher than that. So I don't see any advantage to
This went around.
the splitting the rows. It's, just for organic, it just makes a wider path for weeds and harder to cultivate.
Yeah, sure.
Population is a big part of the problem.
Population in the field that is a big part of the problem. On some Amish farms, they handouts still, where they selected for very large ears. So you need a full flex here, you can reduce the population, still get 200 bushel yields.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well.
For an organic system, we wanna go the opposite. More population for better weed control.
But some of these are.
Yeah. All right, other questions? Did I address your question, or were you out of the room? when I-
But one question I have is, okay, when you broadcast it in there, and have you done experimenting, like, do you wanna spread the cover crop before you cultivate the last cultivation, or the after, or like, say if the guy sets up a broadcast it, one, number two, if you put red clover on there, if you want to broadcast red clover, I said, if I want to run a broadcast a week of red clover, we could probably be a little bit deeper than the red clover. I didn't know if you got any experience one way or another with something like that, if you want to cultivate it in, or you don't want to leave it on top when it's loose enough.
Right, so I don't have a ton of experience with that, but the instances where we have broadcast it, we did it after the final cultivation pass, we didn't do it before. And after the final cultivation pass worked pretty well.
Did you do red clover that way too?
We did a mix, actually, it was a mix of red clover, annual ryegrass, and hairy vetch. And so what I will say is the vetch didn't take, and I think that's probably because it was sitting on the surface, it's a little bigger seed. But the red clover and annual ryegrass, I did fine.
I haven't necessarily done it before. Eat the vegetables. Do a lot of things. It's just okay. That's two things. One is you use larger seed, and then the actual grains that all across sometimes it's birds.
Yeah.
They can see where you have to bring for the way.
All right, another.
So, except for last year, I planted it standing right last year, but prior to that, prior 2 years, we planted 30 and 60 inch and interseeded everything. To your point on planting, we cultivated and put one of those little wall spreader boxes right on the cultivator. So when we was going through that final pass, about that E5 stage, we applied it with the crimson clover, a radish turnip mix, and cereal rye. I've shown Dan here some pictures when it got to harvest, and it had a nice green stand to it. And we put it on fairly heavy. The problem is when you got a little wall box spreader on there, you got to stop about every acre and a half to build it. So that's why we're building a heavier one this year on the field cultivator frame, or chisel plot frame, so it's a little high rise. But yield wise, we put it on 58,000 on our 68-inch rows. And we never seen any yield drag. Actually, our 60s improved by 4 to 6 bushel per acre. Over our 30-inch rows right beside it, and it was 8 bushel better than the corn that didn't have any coverage when it didn't seed. So they get some benefit from the crimson. We're going to do it again this year with the new setup. All the benefits in the world. I mean, for 60-inch corn, you get a lot more sunshine and things in there, so you can actually get down the coverage. And once you take it off, that green is beautiful. I mean, it takes off once that green hits the sunshine, hits that green, and it just goes.
One thing that I will note, I really like crimson clover in this system as well. I've got another trial that I didn't present information on, and crimson clover performed better than both Balanza and red clover in that particular trial. What I like about it is if it overwinters, and there's, that can be a little bit hit or miss sometimes. But when it does overwinter, it greens up faster and you get more early growth prior to termination. And so you get, more ecosystem services, more nitrogen associated with that in the crimson clover setting. Is it, head and shoulders above the rest? Probably not. It does, probably pretty similarly to red clover, which is maybe a little safer. But I do like crimson clover in the setting.
Yeah, I recommend it too. I found that the country pride is good at it.
I was gonna say the same thing, and, I've seen it perform better than other crimson clover varieties that I've tested side by side. So I'm glad to hear that, that you've seen the same thing.
Use what we had good success with the Kentucky Pride, the radish, and the fried grass, but that can sometimes be a problem.
Agreed. All right, great questions. I still hate to cut it off, but I know we're over time. But, again, love getting out here and meeting you guys. I'm thrilled to see, this conference continue to grow. And, thanks for coming out and showing your support. That's actually communicating a really clear message, not only to me, but also to people higher up the university food chain, that there's demand for this type of work and opportunity to share and learn from each other. And so that's why I find these meetings really valuable. So, thank you very much. Drive safe.
Great, thanks everybody.
I'm not sure where it got to, either around here somewhere. I think that's it for today, so if you need CCA credits, come up and get the report and, drive safe.
Well, I know that, Harold.